I read Brainiac, Adventures in the Curious, Competitive, Compulsive World of Trivia Buffs by Ken Jennings in January of 2022. This book has two running threads throughout the whole thing. The first is that it follows the history of trivia in America, from first radio shows to progressing to television in various forms and various waves of popularity. And then the second thread is that it follows Ken Jennings on his personal history-making run on the show Jeopardy! I should preface this maybe by saying that I didn't grow up with Jeopardy! It's not on here in Australian television, but I had heard of it. I'd seen it referenced on American TV shows, especially the music. So I was aware of it, and I actually was even aware of Ken Jennings' historic run because it made news here in Australia. But I'm not what you'd say a Jeopardy! Fan, but I do love trivia, and I just adored this book. It was so interesting. I think that even if you do not care about Ken Jennings at all, you should maybe pick this up. And if you're interested in trivia even a little bit, you will get something out of it. I think what the most interesting thing that I found through this book was there's a push and pull throughout the whole book on people trying to decide how useful trivia actually is. On the one hand, people are saying, well, if you're spending all this time learning facts, and memorizing them, a lot of these people get so consumed by that they don't actually then go on to, do something a little more significant with all that knowledge. They don't write a book, or they don't go on to PhD research or something like that. Quote, "Players can quite competently answer questions on books they've never read, paintings they've never seen, and science they've never studied, merely because they've heard similar questions before." End quote. But then on the other hand, people were saying that, arbitrary knowledge that seems to have no purpose can then lead to a framework on which to hang more significant knowledge. Quote, "He also believes that the framework of knowledge he learned from Quiz Bowl has helped him to learn all kinds of other things more easily. It's like your mind is a net, trying to catch all this information whizzing by. The more facts you know, the tighter the mesh of the net is, and the easier it is to retain the new things you're trying to learn." End quote. And this really did resonate with me because in 2020, I decided just out of the blue to memorize all the countries in the world. And this was just out of pure boredom, truthfully. And I used, very irrelevant mnemonics, like things that are not related to the country at all, but just like weird ways for them to stick in my brain. But now that I have memorized all the countries, when I see a fact in, an article or a book or something about a country, I know where that country is now. I'm like, oh, I know exactly where that is. I know what country they're referring to. And so that more factual, more interesting information actually has somewhere to land and stay in my mind. And so I actually have learned more about different countries in the past couple years since I memorized them than I ever had before. And I actually read the book Moonwalking with Einstein last year, I think, around the time I was doing this memorization project. And this talks about memorization, competitive memorization. And I actually think it's a fantastic pairing with this book. If you like Moonwalking with Einstein, you will also enjoy Brainiac and vice versa. But this book is all about the benefits of using mnemonics for memorization and how the very act of doing that can be beneficial for your mind. I also think one of the great sparkles that he put in this book is that he has trivia all throughout. He said at the beginning that trivia is always funner to actually do than to hear about. So throughout each chapter, he has little trivia and with a little footnote, and then at the end of each chapter, he gives the answer. So you can try and answer them throughout the chapter. And I got a handful here and there. I missed more than I got. I will admit. But ultimately, I think I really like the point that Jennings makes, which is that trivia and trivia shows like Jeopardy, they make knowledge fun. He says, quote, "Then, as now, your standard reference books portrayed knowledge as spinach, something unpleasant but nutritious, necessary for fortifying young minds. These trivia pioneers saw knowledge as a light, airy dessert, pointless but pleasurable for its own sake." But yes, I thought I would end this video just very randomly on my personal favourite trivia shows. I will say I did go down a bit of a Jeopardy clip YouTube rabbit hole after reading this book, But I have two favourite trivia shows that I'd love to talk about. The first one is Pointless. This is a UK show, and I just think this has a fantastic conceit. Basically, your goal is to not only get the correct answer, but to get the most obscure correct answer. This is not a super intellectual trivia game. Like, this is not at the level of Jeopardy. It's more for, everyday folks, not trivia buffs. And I think that's actually reflected in the low, somewhat random prize money that you can get. Whereas Jeopardy is very much like the more you know, the more you can earn. I will warn you, there is also a lot of chat all throughout the show. I often will fast forward through a lot of that. Shows like The Chase or Jeopardy have a much higher question per minute ratio than Pointless. But what can I say? I just love the structure of the questions so much that I watch it anyway. The other trivia show that I love is called Only Connect. This is also a UK show, and this is almost the opposite of Pointless. It is very erudite. It is all about lateral thinking. Some of these questions are just so obscure, or not even, the answer may not be obscure, but the connection to the answer is really just so difficult. I mean, you barely get any questions, but when you do, you feel so good. And Victoria Coren Mitchell is just a wonderful host, and I really enjoy this show as well. And lastly, I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention what is the best game show on YouTube, Book Jeopardy. This is made by Alexandria. I mean, what an intersection, right? I read, a book about Jeopardy, and suddenly there is our very own BookTube Jeopardy. I will link the playlist down below. Go and watch them. They are a joy to watch and play along with. Anyway, that's all. Thank you for watching.